Welcome to a Sim Code. Looking to enhance your coding skills? Like, subscribe, and let's dive deeper into Python together. The provided Python code simulates a simplified version of the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol (DHCP) process. Import the necessary modules for networking for simulation purposes. The socket module is typically used to create network connections. We will simulate that concept here. The random module is used to randomly assign IP addresses from the available pool. The time module helps simulate waiting or lease times with sleep delays. Step 1. Setting up the DHCP server. Constructor method to initialize the DHCP server with IP range. The range from which IPs are assigned to clients. IP underscore range underscore start and IP underscore range underscore end are the starting and ending IPs in the available range. Both are integers, for example, 192.168. 100 becomes 192.168.1100 after removing the dots. Integer, start of the IP range. Integer, end of the IP range. Self-allocated underscore IPS will store the IPs that have already been assigned to clients. It's a list that will hold integer values representing IPs. Method to assign an IP address from the available range. Create a list of available IPs by checking which ones have not been allocated. Available underscore IPS is a list containing all available IPs that have not been allocated yet. If no IPs are available, return none. Randomly select one available IP from the list. Selects a random IP from available underscore IPS list. Add the selected IP to the list of allocated IPs. Return the assigned IP address to the caller. Method to simulate the lease time for the IP address given to a client. Lease time is randomly assigned between 30 to 120 seconds. In a real-world scenario, lease time could vary based on server configuration. Integer representing the lease time in seconds. Step 2. Setting up the DHCP client. Constructor for initializing the DHCP client. The client needs to interact with the server to request an IP address. Server is a reference to the DHCP server object that the client will request an IP from. Initialize client attributes. The client's current IP address, initially none, meaning no IP assigned. The lease time for the IP address, initially set to 0. Method to request an IP address from the DHCP server. In a real-world DHCP process, the client broadcasts a DHCP DISCOVR message. For simplicity, we print the message and simulate a delay. Simulates a network delay, 1 second. This would be a wait for a response in real life. The client now requests an IP from the server and assigns it to self-IP_address. Calls the server's assign_IP method to get an IP. If no IP is available, return false, failure. Print the assigned IP address. Now the client gets a lease time for the IP. Calls the server's lease_time method to get lease duration. Return true, indicating the IP assignment process was successful. Method to release the IP address back to the server after the lease expires or the client disconnects. Print a message to indicate the release of the IP address. Reset the client's IP address to none, indicating no IP is being held. Step 3. Simulate DHCP process in action. Function to simulate the DHCP process where multiple clients request IPs from the server. Initialize a DHCP server object with an IP range from 192.168.1.100 to 192.168.1.110. The IP addresses are represented as integers, no dots. Client 1 requests an IP address from the server. Create a new DHCP client object associated with DHCP_server. If the IP request was successful, true returned, we continue the simulation. Simulate the client holding the IP for its lease time. Client holds the IP for the duration of the lease time. Release the IP back to the server after the lease expires. Client 2 requests an IP address from the server. Another client is created and associated with the same server. If the IP request was successful, proceed to lease expiration. Simulate the client holding the IP for its lease time. Client holds the IP for the duration of the lease time. Release the IP back to the server after the lease expires. Start the simulation. Calls the simulate underscore DHCP underscore process function to run the process. Explanation of our code. The DHCP server is initialized with an IP range, which is represented as integers, e.g., 192.168.1100 for 192.168.100. The server assigns IP addresses to clients when they request one, keeping track of allocated IPs in self-allocated underscore IPS. The DHCP client requests an IP from the server and holds it for a certain lease period, after which the client releases it. The request underscore IP method simulates the process of a client asking for an IP from the DHCP server, and the server assigns an available IP. The lease underscore time function simulates the lease period for each IP. After the lease ends, the client releases the IP back to the server. This is a simplified simulation, and in a real-world scenario, more network complexity, broadcasts, retries, etc., would be involved. Now run our code. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.